Robert, I'm working on changing my perspectives. Why aren't they shifting? Because it takes time. I couldn't just sit there on paper and paper dispute away to get to recovery alone. That played a significant part. But I needed to see things in reality too, shift and change my perspectives. I can remember, for example, being in Barcelona in 15 years ago, and I had just injured a disc in my neck badly. I was in really high level of pain, and I was on holiday with a friend. And he wanted to go everywhere, go out to the bar, go to here for lunch, do all these things all the time, all the time. And I was in pain. I just wanted to sit down. Also, I'm not someone who wants to rush around all the time. I like to sit down, take things a bit slowly, and enjoy things. I don't like to be cramped with so many people, right? Because I like to take in life. It's not from having low frustration tolerance. I can do all that stuff, but also I like to take in life. And I remember I sat down at this cafe and I sat there, I was having a coffee, and I had very, very bad pain in my neck, right? And I still had OCD, right? I was 24 at the time, yeah? So I still had severe OCD. But I think at that point I was going through, perspectives had started shifting, but not completely. I can't remember the exact age I was there. And I remember like looking out at life around me and just seeing things like maybe a homeless guy on the street struggling, maybe looking up at the sky and thinking about, hey, I'm traveling on my own, I'm in another country, things could go wrong here, it's not exactly my home environment. And that used to trigger me in the past, the sort of vastness of the universe, especially when you're high up on a mountain or on a plane, seeing the scale of uncertainty and the size of the universe. And so I used to get triggered by that existential fears. But I remember just thinking about life and looking at life and just thinking, I'm a human here passing through with some enjoyable experiences, and then I go, right? And it's just little observations that you're having about life bit by bit. It almost feels like on some level OCD is like as you grow up, your consciousness is, you're becoming more and more conscious. And it feels like you almost like take a too deep leap into being conscious, or you just feel too alive or past the threshold, and that's what makes all the OCD stuff come on. It feels a bit like that. And I can remember just sort of reflecting on life in those moments. And those reflections came at many times. Maybe it was in a nightclub, half drunk, standing there, looking down at people dancing and thinking to myself about how life is and how my life is. Maybe it's with a girlfriend. She's just gone to the bathroom, thinking about our relationship, thinking about my situation. Maybe it's waking up in bed, looking out at the sun, out the window, and just thinking about life. Maybe when you all these little moments that you're thinking about life, and they just come into play, and they just shift perspectives gradually. I could say many things like that. I remember once being in Covent Garden. I had a friend, he was a tattoo artist, and he was a guy from New Zealand. And he'd done a lot of street performing. He'd been very poor in the past, and he'd done a lot of street performing in Covent Garden, so he knew all the street performers in Covent Garden. And then one day he introduced me to a guy who was about 60, homeless, who was like a crazy street performer, but complete nutcase. And and he said to me, he's like, Robert, when I leave here, you're going to look after this guy, and you're going to come here once every couple of months and buy him a pint, yeah? And you're going to sit and have a beer with him because he hasn't got that many friends. He's living on the street, right? And I thought, all right, I will. And I remember going for drinks with this guy. It was very annoying and drove me mad. But the things that he said about life, just different things, just a different world. And me seeing that and seeing his perception, just like how he thought he was completely free because he didn't have a house, how living homeless to him was the only way he wanted to live, right? Even though you could see he had loads of problems relating to his past relationship and depression and anxiety from losing his partner. But all these things are subtle reflections. I remember one night he said to me, and I was young at this time. He said to me, he said, "Come out. We're going out with some other street performers and other people that were semi-homeless. for a few beers near Covent Garden. So I said, yeah, I'll go along. And I went along. And I think one guy on the street tried to steal one guy's unicycle, which was like a double unicycle, you know, where you're really high up on it, like where it's like you're at 6 foot height. And I remember this guy, we were just standing there having a beer, and they were obviously not all of them the most sort of mentally balanced. And this guy just sort of pulled out a flick knife straight away and held it to the guy who just robbed who was trying to rob the unicycle. And instantly the guy backed down and gave him back the unicycle and went away. And I watched this guy whilst he still had this flick knife in his hand, because it caught me off guard, because I didn't expect a flick knife to be pulled that second. And I looked at him and I thought, do you see that guy? He's ready for anything in life. His whole life to eat, he's having and I was watching him pay for his pint. He's big bag of coins, and he was just at all the time paying the coins that he'd been doing street performing out to pay for the drinks. And I watched him and I thought to myself, he's ready for anything, that guy. You know, his whole life has been a sort of like survival. Yeah. I didn't know his whole life, but I imagined it was like that. And I could see that, like, to him, it was like sort of life and death survive. And then his job's sort of life and death survive, because he's doing street performing where he's having to get a crowd, he's having to be loud, he's having to keep entertaining, changing his act to get the money. And then I watched him buying drinks for everyone in that group, right? Bear in mind, those guys haven't got much money, but some of them did. And some of them were very proud of that. So I watched him buying drinks for everyone. I thought, flip, he's just bought a lot of drinks, right? Bear in mind, I'm young as well, so I'm not making much money. And he's buying drinks for everyone. And I watched that, and then I said, "You do well today? You know, did you do well?" He said, "Do well." He said, "This wasn't a very good day." He said, "Some days I make," and I can't remember what figure he said, but I thought, wow, that's a lot of money at that time. And he was really trying to show to me, you know, like, look, this can be very high paying. He was very proud of it. And then his act was obviously amazing, very difficult. I think he did something like riding a double unicycle with like juggling sort of things on fire and then catching them in his mouth on the unicycle. I mean, crazy stuff. And jumping on the unicycle over people, all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And I remember thinking, look, that guy, he's ready to survive. And he's got no fear in that situation. And those things were changes in my mind. Oh, look at this hard life. Look at this situation. What am I complaining about? He's homeless. I thought homeless people were all miserable. Irrational beliefs that I had, you know? And then, then actually not. Oh, look at this guy. He's actually not. He's actually content with this situation. Right. And you see those, and they all get into my perspective fears that I had at the time. Fear of going homeless, fear of going bankrupt, something like that. Those anxieties relating to these things, which are all tied into the fear of going to prison one, because of what if a harm situation had occurred. And all those things at that time were like just little subtle perspective shifts, seeing all these different worlds and lives and people, how they're into it. And seeing people's lives that from the outside would look terrible, depending how you looked at it. And then when you actually know them, they're actually, from their perspective, it isn't like that, right? Like I remember seeing a guy who was completely tattooed, all his face, whole body, all black, right? So every single millimeter. He was like one of the most tattooed men in the world. He was a street performer in Covent Garden. And I thought the outside world would think he's so weird and he's so strange. But then when you actually speak to these guys, you see their insights into why. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of tattooing at that level is a self-harm, is a hating self, especially people who are doing a lot of face tattoos, things like that, can be a self-harm aspect. And I've met a lot of people that have loads and loads of tattoos, tattoo artists, and when you speak to them, you can kind of see where that aspect came from. That's obviously not all, by any means. There's loads of people heavily tattooed that are completely fine. I was about to say Nicholas Pinella is completely fine, but knowing him and working closely with him, he's definitely not. There's something definitely wrong with him. And so you learn these things all the way along, subtle perspective shifts. Maybe somebody you know who has a very balanced life suddenly loses a baby, and then you see their difficult life, and then you see how they handle it, and then that creates a subtle perspective shift. Maybe your friend's father or mother goes bankrupt, and then you see how their life adjusts and adapts, right? When you put yourself around all these different things or see these things and look for these insights into society and life, you stop and watch this. These help the perspective shifts because we have these rigid views, barriers that we believe. Just go through the common, normal, standard ones that most people pick. The most popular ones are, I want to go to university, get a good job, make my family happy, sustain that job, get married, have a pet, keep my family happy, pay off a mortgage, and that's life. A lot of people's view. Then what you're doing is you're following what society has fixed for you, and anything outside of those boundaries go back in the past was seen as very weird. If you said today, like, oh, I'm going to work from my laptop and I'm going to go to the beach and work in Tulum, and I'm going to write a travel blog, people be like, wow, cool, that's amazing, that's really great, you can become an influencer. Right. If you did that in 1950, 60 in some other form, not internet, whatever, they'd think, yeah, it's a bit weird, that guy, he's dropped out, bit of a loser, right? Still doing places like where Momin is in Pakistan, if you're not married or anything like that, seen as, well, loser, weird, especially for women. If you're not married at 40, oh, she's finished, she's useless, she's a loser. They're going to be those kinds of things, okay? So you need to look at those rigid beliefs that society holds. Now, I'm not saying that going and living on a beach and giving up all your possessions is the way to go, as people usually find when they do those things, to desperately escape uncomfortable feelings and beliefs that they hold, and then realize it's not the dream that they had imagined. Going within society's guidelines is healthy, and then adapt as best you can for your own situation. But at the same time, just realizing we invented these barriers. We invented these routes, these mental roads to keep ourselves in. If you tie a horse to a plastic chair, it doesn't run away because it thinks it's tied. But the plastic chair, all these situations obviously have not guaranteed. But I'm using that as an analogy. Don't hold me to that. But I'm saying a lot of animals just tend to think, looking at that oh, that means they're fixed and they can't move. And little do they know that actually, if they do move, the thing will drag very quickly, and they've got the power because of all these psychological bonds, blocks, mental chains that we have. And that's very, very, very much the case. With a lot of things that we hold ourselves in rigidity towards being happy, who we should be. You can change your identity at any time. You know, I was always a very sort of loud personality, was very outgoing most of my life, and then I realized that that's an element of my personality, that outgoing character. But I actually spend a lot of time on my own thinking and philosophy and things like that, which brings about my work today and why you guys are here. So that is not, you're not a fixed state. We're different personalities with different people. I'm different with my parents to how I am with a girlfriend. I'm different with the girlfriend to how I am with the guys that I work with. I'm different with the guys that I work with to how I am with some friends. But then most of it blends within reason, like girlfriend to work to friends, similar, but it has slight tweaks. So yeah, you can adapt and change those things to give you better advantages in life. And you don't have to stay fixed where people say like, oh, I'm a this person, I'm a that person. You're not. You can change, you can adapt. And so I hope that was some insights that you found helpful today.